I want to take you through the assessment that we made with regard to our cookie policies and how that resulted in one global policy with layered notices. I guess the most important thing to think about, is why were we going to start this discussion? Late last year, the privacy team, we got together and we decided, hey, you know what, let's put our cookie policies actually under the microscope. We have cookie policies on many of our websites, but we did not have something that was just, one whole. And also just looking at the environment over the past several months, there's been increased press with regard to cookie implementations, particularly here in the EU. We've had the do not track discussions as well. And we also know that there's been several countries that have implemented new comprehensive data protection legislation, as Stuart mentioned this morning. I think even in the APAC region, there have been 8 countries with new legislation in the past 12 months. So this was certainly for us a motivation to take a closer look at what we were doing, not only from the compliance side, but also looking at it from the consumer side. So going further into the assessment, I think here just shows you some of the most important aspects that we looked at. First of all, does it make sense for us to have one global policy, or is it more interesting for us to stick with a customized cookie policy per country? Just to kind of give you an idea of what we're dealing with, so I'm the head of privacy for our classifieds business. And the classifieds business has 45 websites in 35 countries. So, for example, in the UK, you might be familiar with Gumtree. In Denmark, you might be familiar with DBA. In the Netherlands, it's Marktplaats. We also have the Kijiji brands or the Alamala brands. So there's a lot of different websites, particularly for my portfolio. But you're also looking at, for example, the eBay.com, the traditional auction business model, or even looking at the PayPal business, which we also had to deal with. So this was certainly a big question for us, is how we were going to best handle that. And could we write something broad enough to cover all of those businesses, because they're not the same business model. And we also wanted to be mindful of the technology that we were dealing with, because obviously there's a lot of discussion about cookies, but we also know that okay, it's not just cookies, there's more than that. Some people might call them tracking technologies, there's discussions about browser fingerprinting. So what can we call this, and can we put it all in one policy? And we also want to be mindful that we know that there's going to be new technologies coming in the future, so how do we cover for that as well, and are we going to have to update in 6 months? I hope that we wouldn't have to update at least for the next 6 months. And also just looking at the current the regulatory schemes. As we know here in the EU, the implementation has been it's been very different from country to country. So how can we best comply not only here in the EU, but also looking at even the emerging markets where there may not be so much privacy legislation.